I'm Sister Helen Prejean, and I'm with the Catholic Mobilizing Network. And we are a group working with the U.S. Catholic bishops to educate and activate Catholics in this country to end the death penalty. And I want to take you with me on a very deep journey. It's one I'm still on myself. And really, it's the mystery of the cross. There are two arms on the cross. The symbol, of course, of execution that Jesus endured at the hands of the Romans and is a symbol of our salvation now, and we see it in every church in which we go. But by my getting involved with the death penalty and accompanying people on death row, and then the murder victims' families and what they have suffered in terrible crimes done to their loved ones, I've descended into this mystery of the cross in a very special way. I see both arms of the cross, one arm representing this perpetrator who's done this unbelievably heinous, cruel act of killing an innocent human being, and on the other arm of the cross, the murder victims' families who are suffering. And we live in a culture that says to us, choose sides. If you're for the murder victims' families, then you are going to be for the death penalty because that gives them their ultimate justice. They suffered a death of their loved one, and only a death can really give them justice. But then there's the gospel of Jesus, who said, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye. And I say to you, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, who pointed to a restorative justice, not simply of imitating the evil, but of having love be the answer in a very strong way, that love will not be overcome by hate. So in my own journey, first it was to the side of the cross of the perpetrator, visiting a man on death row, meeting him, seeing he was a human being. But then I also came to see the murder victims' families and their suffering. The first murder victims' families, that really where the encounter took place, and this is in the story of Dead Man Walking, but two young, beautiful teenagers were killed on a November night, and they were left dead in a field, and they had been shot in the most horrible way you can imagine, execution style in the back of the head. And the parents of these children then are going to deal with this for the rest of their life. Everybody was Catholic in this. The girls' parents and the boys, and the Saunier, Patrick Saunier, the man I was visiting, and me. And Lloyd LeBlanc, the father of David LeBlanc, the 17-year-old kid that was killed, was the first one to take me into the Christian mystery of being a victim and losing his son, his beautiful son. And because he was a believer and follower of the way of Jesus, and everybody was saying to him that he had to be for the death penalty or to look like he didn't love his son. And sometimes murder victims' families get caught in that, because if you sustain an ultimate loss in the death of your loved one, and society's offered you the death as payment for it or justice, I mean, and I know victims' families that don't go for the death penalty, and people tell them, well, it's a shame you didn't love your child. This is like a cultural thing. This is what we do. And Lloyd LeBlanc was the first one to take me into this, and because Jesus had said, forgive. And he had tried to go to the place that all of his neighbors and all of his places were saying. He was trying to hate Patrick Saunier and say, yeah, he did want to see him die. But he didn't like the way it made him feel. And so he said, no, they killed my son, but I'm not going to let them kill me, and I'm going to do what Jesus said. We have murder victims' families around this country who are standing up as our witnesses. In the letter to the Hebrews, it talks about a cloud of witnesses. The murder victims' families are the ones standing up. When New Jersey did away with the death penalty 2 years ago, 62 murder victims' families testified, don't kill for us. And they are our living witnesses to restorative justice. And sometimes they phrased it in terms of, they said things like, Even if I watch the person be killed in front of my eyes who killed my mother, I'm going to come home and the chair is still going to be empty where my mother sat. It could never restore her life. Only God can restore life. And they are the ones who are teaching us in this country that there's a better way than simply imitating the violence. In my second book, The Death of Innocence, I take you with me on this journey as I've continued to accompany people on death row. I have accompanied 6 people to execution. The last 2 human beings I was with, I believe, are innocent. If you read the book, The Death of Innocence, I think you'll come to the same conclusion, because you as a reader are going to know all the things that were hidden from the jury and what they never heard, or a jailhouse informer who was lying. The stories are about an African-American man named Dobie Williams, and he had an IQ of 65. If he had lived 2 years longer, he would have lived long enough for the Supreme Court in the Atkins decision to come to a conclusion that it's against the Constitution to kill mentally challenged people. But the Supreme Court came to their conclusion too late to save Dobie's life. And through Dobie's story, and then the second story in the book is a man in Virginia by the name of Joseph Odell, who, if he could have had a DNA test that could have saved his life, but the courts wouldn't let him have the test because they said it was too late in the time frame. He should have had the test done earlier. The DNA could have shown that he clearly was innocent and not guilty of the death of a woman, Helen Shartner. And so in the book, Death of Innocence, I myself am beginning to learn a lot more about how the courts work and just how broken the system is. We now have 139 wrongfully convicted people who have been exonerated off of death row. They're saved because college volunteers and these innocence projects get involved in these cases and go back and dig up the evidence, or that was hidden, or the police report that pointed from the very beginning that there was another suspect, but that was submerged and we never knew about it. And the reason the system's so broken is because when we go to apply the death penalty, there's a completely different standard. If you have means and you can hire an attorney, you never go to death row. It's all poor people who go to death row. We have 3,300 people on death row. And what's one of the effects of being poor and having a court-appointed attorney when you go into trial? Trial's supposed to be the place where the truth is told. But if you're not getting good defense who can't access for you or do independent forensic testing on the evidence, the jury never hears the truth of what really happened. So consequently, we have innocent people that go on to death row. And in this book, Death of Innocence, I also, in the Joseph Odell story, the second one, a man in Virginia, where Italy got involved in his case, and he became the occasion where I got to have a dialogue with Pope John Paul about the death penalty. I was one part of the dialogue that was going on with bishops around the world. It was, the bubbles were coming up in the pot about dialogue on the death penalty because of human rights gaining ascendancy in the world, that human beings should not be tortured, should not be killed. There are now 140 countries in the world that don't have the death penalty. We're not one of them yet, but we're on our way, and Catholics are a big part of that, because right now we're the leading moral wedge in the discourse going on in this country about ending the death penalty. Bishops are standing up before legislatures, and the people are writing letters, which I hope you too will do when you come through this journey yourself. But my dialogue with the Pope was around 2 basic issues, and it was to ask the question, does the Catholic Church only uphold the dignity of innocent life? What about the guilty? And the other is that when I'm walking with a man to execution who's been made defenseless, and he says, please, sister, pray that God holds up my legs. There's no dignity in this death. And that we as Catholics have come, and the Pope helped us do this, to come to a pro-life stance across the board. Yes, to the dignity of innocent life, but even guilty life also has a dignity that must not be taken from them. And that's a challenge. Both arms of this cross to reach out to victims' families in their suffering, but also to reach out to the perpetrators of the crime, and that Jesus is on both sides, and so should we be.